Good morning, good afternoon, and welcome to today's Chief Learning Officer Magazine webinar. My name is Alec, and I'm going to be here in the background to help answer any of your general or technical questions. But before we get started, I'm going to cover a couple things you need to know about the session. There's no dial-in number for attendees. All audio will be streamed through your computer speakers or headphones, so please adjust your volume there accordingly. You can submit questions for today's speaker or any technical issues that may arise by clicking on the questions icon located on the right-hand side of your screen, labeled here with this top arrow. Just click that icon, type in your question, and click submit. If it's content related, we may pull it during the Q&A session if time allows. And if it's a technical question, I will have an answer for you that will appear on your screen shortly after you submit. You can download a PDF to follow along with today's presentation by clicking on the handouts icon, also located on the right-hand side of your screen, labeled here with this bottom arrow. Click there and you should be able to get a PDF to follow along with today. Today's webinar is being recorded. You're going to receive a link to the recording in a follow-up email, along with a link to the PDF and your HRCI and SHRM certification information for today's event. All right, so we're very excited to have Reggie Padine with us, the Director of Learning and Development at Kaufman-Rassen. Reggie's goal is to help Kaufman-Rassen achieve its strategic objectives through learning programs that improve professionals' technical and technology skills, build on their individual strengths, and guide them on career paths to develop future leaders. So as I said, it's our pleasure to have Reggie with us. So Reggie, let's get started.
Well, thank you so much, Alec, and welcome everybody. I am so delighted to be here, and I'm glad that you can join us. So today's presentation is going to be hopefully very practical for all of you as learning and development professionals. But before we get started, let me give you a little bit of background on myself. I've been involved in training and development for the last 10 years. I've managed corporate universities for companies in retail, telecommunications, and presently at Kaufman-Rassen, which is an accounting firm here in Miami, Florida. I'm also an ordained minister and worked in the ministry for 10 years before switching careers, which is quite an interesting shift, but it has helped me a great deal to really understand people and work with organizations. I've heard it once that if you can successfully work in a non-for-profit organization with volunteers, you can work anywhere, and that's certainly been the case. I'm very excited. Actually 2 years ago, I published a book, self-published, Get Out of the Dumpster, which is my story of going from a high school dropout to a doctor in education. It was quite a journey, and I was very proud of that project. My background is in business. I have an MBA, Master's in Divinity, and a Doctor in Education, and currently reside in Miami, Florida. So if I'm successful in this presentation today, my goal is to help you as a training and development professional strategically align yourselves with the organization's leadership in order to help foster a culture of learning. Trying to move away from just training for training's sake, and what we really want to do is create a culture of learning in our organizations. Also, is to help foster a culture of learning within the organization, and finally is to leverage technology. I know that's a big thing going on right now, and it's only getting bigger. And so, how do we leverage technology to help organizations achieve their goals? And I think that it's a very exciting opportunity, which brings me to this point. I think that we live in the best of times and worst of times. You probably recognize this quote from A Tale of Two Cities. It was the best of times and the worst of times. It was an age of wisdom and an age of foolishness. And the reality is that we have two realities in as training and development professionals. We have things coming at us and at our organizations faster and faster than ever. Things are moving in a lightning speed right now, and it's hard to keep up at times. We have more technology at our disposal than ever before. It's really fascinating to know that our cell phones have more technology than the spaceships had back in the day. There is more connectivity, and globalism is today a reality. No longer is it just a far-fetched idea. It's a reality, and it's here to stay. So today we are connected with, I know, with people all across the country and possibly around the world in an instant. We have definitely multiple generations working together, which makes it very interesting dynamic for those of us in leadership. More diversity than ever, and we are expected to do more. Now, the flip side of that is that even though things are moving faster, sometimes we're put on the brakes with, let's take our time, and that sometimes that could be our worst enemy. Even though we have more technology than ever before, today's attention span of our audience, of the people that we're working with, is shorter than ever, and people lose interest quite fast. Hopefully, that's not going to be the case here today for us. I'll try to keep it entertaining. Even though we have more connectivity and globalism, we seem to be more isolated, and there's more individualism taking place in our culture today, which is quite an interesting dynamic. Even though we have multiple generations working together, some of you may be asking, so what's a millennial again? Right? And in fact, I read that millennials have overtaken Generation Xers in the workforce as right now. It is the case. Even though we have more diversity than ever, there seems to be a little understanding of our differences, and of course that can hinder creating a culture conducive to learning. And even though we're asked to do more and more, we're asked to do more and more with less. So, that leaves us with what are we to do? What have you done in situations like that? I know that at times it feels like we could be paralyzed by all these changes and all these things going on in our organizations, and especially for us learning and development professionals. The temptation, of course, is to pretend like nothing's going on and to sweep things under the rug, which is never a good option. Not doing something is never a good option. Those problems won't go away, but we certainly know that opportunities can pass on by in our organizations if we don't do something about it, if we don't seize the opportunities. And we want to make sure that everyone in our organizations is functioning at an optimal level of performance, because after all, that will help our organizations achieve their goals. And management definitely may be looking to you and to me for some basic answers on how to deal with this. So we are in a very interesting situation where we can help our organizations achieve their goals, and we can all be successful. Now, what I want to share with you is lessons that I've learned in the 10 plus years that I've been working in learning and development, and what I've learned on creating a culture of learning. Let me ask you a question. Do you remember 2008? Where were you in 2008? Well, we all remember there was the Great Recession, and that's when I cut my teeth in training and development. I began in November of 2007, which was a very interesting and exciting situation for me, because I was switching careers from ordained ministry to the corporate setting, but I was very apprehensive about this new venture. Then 2008 arrived, and there were two impacting events that really affected me, that really put me on my toes. Number one, the company that I was actually working for had been sold, and most of the employees began losing their jobs because they were moving operations elsewhere. In fact, during that summer, about 200 plus people lost their jobs in one single day. And then a few months after that, the Great Recession hit, of course, and everything went crazy especially on training and development, because, as you know, this is probably the first place they start cutting when things in the economy go bad. Needless to say that the organization that I was working for at that moment had no culture of learning. they were training people. It was in the retail space, and so they needed to train people in order to keep their doors open, but there was no culture of learning. And so it made it very interesting, because even though there was not a culture of learning, people still needed to engage in training in order to keep the doors open. So I saw that as an opportunity, and I started asking myself the question: how can I bring about something to this organization of 2,000 employees with stores in 375 locations in 48 states in Puerto Rico? What is it that I can do? So I went into action. And I realized that even though there was not a culture of learning, my past experience as a minister taught me that that I could do something. I could help ease people's anxieties during that time, and I could help the management team really get things going at the retail at the forefront in the trenches. Um, Needless to say that because of the economy, the economy was so bad, performance at the store level was bad, and so I found a significant way to bring down the cost of training and streamline the training to those 375 locations. The fact of the matter is that training was only as good as whoever was conducting the training in those stores, and that was a problem. So what I did was I partnered with a couple of LMS providers and course authoring software providers, and really taught myself how to create an online content. So by taking the materials that were being shipped originally to the stores, I could take that content, put it online, and I figured out a way to deliver that content through the very antiquated POS system that the stores had. And the best thing is that because I was partnering with these providers, it didn't cost me a cent to get started. Now, if the company were to approve that plan, the savings would be, I mean, tremendous. I think the first year alone would have saved us about $200,000 in printing and training cost related expenses. So one day, the angel of death, the person we call the VP of resources, came knocking on my door because everybody there at the at our corporate site was losing their jobs, and so he came knocking on my door and asked what I was working on, and so that was the perfect opportunity for me to show him what I was working on. And so I asked him if he had a BlackBerry. This is back in the BlackBerry days. And I asked him if he has his BlackBerry, and he said yes. And so by the press of a couple of keys, he received an email saying that welcome to our corporate university, and he was looking at it puzzled. And right after that, he received a few other emails with invitations for him to take courses, mandatory courses, in this new online operation. He was completely blown away. And I told him that we could release this thing, we could immediately deploy across the organization if he gave me the green light, because everybody was already in the system, everything was ready to go. Needless to say, I had an approval by the CEO of the company within the week, and I kept my job. Now, at that moment, I was on my way on helping the organization become a culture, a true culture of learning by the tools and the disposition that I had. And here are some of the lessons that I learned during that experience. And in fact, is something that I've been able to replicate in 2 other organizations. It all starts with you and I. That's the first key. We have to know the business. It's really incumbent upon the training and development professional to get involved as much as possible with every aspect of the business. We have to know the ins and outs of the organization. It is exceedingly important to know the structure of the organization, how they make money, if it's a for-profit entity, if it's a non-for-profit entity, how do we raise money? how do we lose money? What are the things that the business does that can lose money? What are the performance gaps within the organization? I cannot stress the fact that understanding the business will give you a great footing and will keep the training and development efforts that you bring forth going in the right direction. So, number one is know the business. Number two is know the business. Who are the biggest supporters within the organization that you can partner with? Who are the bigger detractors that sometimes you need to win over? It is very important that as you understand the business, that you think like the CEO, think like an owner. Constantly look for ways to be efficient and effective with little or no additional cost if possible. I know that sometimes it's not realistic, but if we start thinking like an owner and we start thinking on the basis of what is my business all about, we will be going in the right direction. Number three, it's very important as we create a culture of learning within our organizations to be resilient, resourceful, and probably more importantly than anything else, flexible. I had to learn everything that I've done on a shoestring. Nobody, I mean, we didn't have a big budget. We didn't have technologies at our disposal. So everything, I had to be very resilient and resourceful in putting these things together. Sometimes, my boss would not be inclined to doing something, so I had to be flexible and change directions on a moment's notice. But what I did was I minimize, if not eliminate altogether, the expression we can't do that. My first boss was often reminded me. He would say, Reggie, remember, you're just training and development. And what he meant by that is, look, you're the first person they're going to cut if things get really bad, right? So it's very important to be flexible. Produce as much as possible. Become a value to the organization by the products and the content that you put forth in the organization. What's going to happen with that is we will begin, number four, to earn our management's trust and respect. And I cannot, and probably you who've been working in the same profession as I have for a long time, you understand the importance of that. Building and nurturing relationships with management, going up, sideways, or down, is exceedingly important if we're going to be successful in what we do. When we start really bringing value to the organization, we show them that they can count on us, that we get it. There's nothing more frustrating for management when they're dealing with somebody, probably in our position, who doesn't get how the business or the organization works. So when they have a partner in us, and they see that we get it, that will only help build trust and respect from management to what we're trying to do. Is very, very important, and I'm gonna throw a term out there. It's very important to maintain orthodoxy in everything that we do, meaning that we have to support the organizational's doctrine. Now, it doesn't mean that um, we agree with everything that management is doing, or we agree with the direction that they're taking. But what it does is, when we build that respect over time, sometimes it's very slow, but over time we can change some of those things. And sometimes if we get the sense that nothing is ever going to change, then we know we need to change, and is at that point, I think, where we as professionals need to move on. Number five is that we need to become the resource person within the organization. Always try to stay on top of the trends affecting your organization. You have to know that better than anybody else. I like to consider myself the researcher in chief, or the researcher in residence. I'm gonna try to understand all the trends that are going on in my industry. I'm gonna try to understand what the implications for my organization are, and I'm going to try to suggest things that are going to help the organization avoid some of those pitfalls. Be ready to provide educational insight that could further help the organization reach its goals. You have to become that person. So make sure that you have that podcast ready, that case study ready, that article ready for management and other people in the organization to reference, but especially management. It's very, very important that you and I become that resource person. And the only way to become that resource person within the organization is to be a lifelong learner. I mean, you probably know that. During the first semester of my doctoral program, my professor addressed the class and said to us, "Ladies and gentlemen, I hate to tell you this, but by the time you guys complete this program, all of you will be obsolete." The point there was that we can never stop learning. By the time we finish the program, the principles that we were learning would no longer be um, relevant. And so we had to stay on top of everything that was going on within our professions. So we had to read, we had to study, we had to research, attend conferences, seminars, workshops, and get the education that we wanted. Sometimes, that meant going for an extra certification or going for another major. It is very important that for the learning professional to always be learning. In an article by Inc. magazine, I found that the four reasons why you and I should be lifelong learners, and they said this: if we become lifelong learners, we will be happier. Because of the struggle of learning will really uh, give satisfaction at the end of the day. We will become an irreplaceable part of the team. If we know the ins and outs, it's very hard for people to get rid of us because we can provide them the answers. The third thing is that you and I will stay humble. And I don't know about you, but the more I learn, the more I realize that I don't know much, and I have to keep learning. And the more I learn, the more I empathize with people, and so it keeps us humble. And the other thing about being a lifelong learner and why we should always be learning is that we can become better coaches. We can be on top of the greatest and the greatest trends out there that can help people achieve um, their goals professionally. Now let's talk about technology, because it's very important that now that we've dealt with the learning professional, now we have to talk about the technology and how to use it the right way, because this can go very, very well, or it can backfire pretty quickly, as probably some of you have seen. My rule of thumb number 7 here is use the right platform to facilitate learning, not necessarily the most expensive. More expensive doesn't mean better. I had to learn that. Sometimes, some providers will give you the greatest thing out there with all the bells and whistles, and the reality is that you may not need it. Look at the needs of the organization before implementing any new platform. Do your research, shop around, um, play with the toys that are out there. If you need more time, don't hesitate to ask those providers to give you more time. They more than often will. Um, Part of my doctoral dissertation dealt with how people felt when interacting with technology. And I found that implementing technology or online platform or online protocol, whatever you want to call it, really the success of it has to do with three things. Number one, keeping it clean. Make sure that it's clean, not too busy. Number two, make sure that it's easy to navigate. I always, when I consult with other organizations, I tell them, look, you shouldn't have more than 3 clicks to get to whatever it is that you want to get to. And number three is keep it simple. If we keep it clean, easy for people to navigate, and we keep it simple, we are definitely going in the right direction and implementing uh, an online platform or a new technology, learning technology within our organizations. Today more than ever, there's no reason why we can't make our learning accessible. Now, I work in an accounting firm, which has, I mean, all sorts of rules and regulations, and so they put the handcuffs as to what I can and can't do. But regardless of that, staying within the rules that I'm faced with, we are looking for ways to always make learning available to people that could be on the go. And today is better than ever. We have TED Talks and case studies that we can upload. There's a new trend on nano learning where there's these 5 to 10 to 15 minute snippets of learning that people really can take advantage of. Of course, on-demand courses, online learning, it's big and only getting bigger. But the point here is put learning at people's fingertips. Let them play with it. Let them access that information, that content wherever they are, not just behind a computer screen. One of the things that I've done here at Kaufman Rosin is we invested in a good instructional designer. And so what that does is it's every training content that we start designing, we always design with that in mind, that we're expecting our professionals to be out there and maybe going from one call to the next, from one customer to the next, they can access that training on their tablets, on their laptops, or even on their cell phones. So it's an exciting time for learning and development in that sense. It goes without saying that learning is only going to be as good as how relevant it is. And this entails really some good old-fashioned adult learning principles that you and I know. It's very important that people feel like they're involved in the planning of their own instructions. We do that often here by conducting surveys and asking people what it is that they're looking for. I have ongoing conversations with managers because I don't want to create learning content in an ivory tower. I want to make sure that it comes from the bottom up, that it's really addressing the needs of my people. Of course, adult learning theory also says that experience provides the basis for learning activities. And again, so we don't provide anything here that really doesn't address our professionals. And you have to do the same. You have to give them the tools that they need at that moment. But it doesn't mean that you can introduce anything new that goes above and beyond what they need to know. But don't make that your priority or your focal point. Insert it in there as part of the content, but don't make sure that it's not the content. Make sure that the content that you're providing is something that they need. As you know, adults are interested in learning subjects that have an immediate relevance impact on their jobs and on their lives. And so it goes back to what I was saying earlier. And of course, adult learning says that it has to be problem centered. And so make sure that the content that you provide addresses the current needs of the employees within your organization. And really, the only way to find out is to do some good old research and talk to people as much as possible to find out where they are and what their needs are. And so we've discussed, how important it is for us to be really lifelong learners, and it starts with us, and then we move to the technology. But probably the last point, or the last section that I want to focus on is you can't create a culture of learning in an organization if you don't empower people. And what I mean by that is, it's very important to link people's growth and success to the training. Um, there's nothing worse for an employee not to know what it would take for them to get to the next level, and that is certainly true for millennials coming in. I mean, they come in through the doors, and they want to know what is it going to take for me to grow within this organization, and not understanding those dynamics, not having those resources at their disposal will really frustrate a lot of people. And one of the things we've done is to work on the competencies for every single level within our organization. What does it take to be a staff one, a staff two, a manager, a director, or even a partner within the organization? And we've mapped out those competencies. And what we do is we've mapped those competencies to the learning, so people feel like they're making progress and they feel like they're growing. If they don't feel like they're growing, um, they'll take the learning. I know that in our case, a lot of people take learning because they need CPE credits, but that's not going to create a culture of learning. But once you start linking the learning that people need and what they need to grow and be successful to the content that you're creating, it is a powerful, powerful thing. So um, a learning culture requires that learning be linked to the employee's growth and success. Focus on the competencies that are needed for every single level within the organization, and that'll help you move in the right direction. Once you understand that, and there's research that really is out there saying that people need to be have the ability to create their own learning paths. A one size fits all doesn't work anymore. I don't know if it ever did actually, but certainly in today's world, it doesn't work. So give people flexibility of taking ownership of their own learning. Give them choices, lots of choices. Allow them to customize the learning paths that they need in order to get to where they want to get to. And so what we do is we have this overall map that people can access on our learning management system, and then they can customize. They can pick and choose the courses that they want in order to help them get to the next level. Sometimes you have to talk to their manager, and the manager will give input on that. But the point here is give people lots of choices in creating their own learning paths. And what you're going to find is you're going to find people who are probably more motivated to learn because they have ownership. It's something that they have created. It's something they've put together for themselves, not something that is coming from the top. And then finally, you can, in order to to create a culture of learning in an organization, you have to serve as a career and performance coach. um, you know I can't tell you that most of my time is spent talking to people, and really gauging where they're at. And so in order to be a good performance coach, there's a couple of things that we need. We have to be genuinely interested in people. We have to be honest, and sometimes we have to be able to provide that honest. A good coach will provide that honest feedback to someone, but we have to do it in a gracious manner. A good coach is somebody who is a great listener. And so, sitting down and listening to people, what their goals are, or what their frustrations are, what they're lacking, where are they exceeding, is very important to understanding them, and putting together a plan that will help them succeed. And then make every person feel important, and really mean it. And I think that that will take us a greater way in becoming the conduit for creating a culture of learning in our organizations. One final thing that I want to say here before I open up for questions, if there's any, is the importance of making sure that you hire the right people in your team. Um, Everybody in your team has to subscribe to the same philosophy. Everybody has to be on the same page. And the only reason I've been successful in my career is because I've been able to really tap into. Sometimes it's a much bigger staff. Sometimes it's a staff of two. Sometimes it's working with part-time people. Sometimes it's working with interns. But regardless, is making sure that we hire the right people whose hearts are in the right place, and everybody is there to provide the best customer experience possible. Because we're only as good as our team, and the training and development operation is only as good as everybody in the team is only as good as that weakest link. So make sure that we do our jobs in hiring the right people and putting them in the right places. So without further ado, that's all I have. Alec, I'm going to turn it back to you and see if there are any questions. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Reggie. Yeah, we're gonna get some questions in here. If you have a question for Reggie, click on the Q&A icon on the right-hand side of your screen, and then type in your question and click submit. With that, we have a couple in here already, Reggie. So we're gonna start with one from Dominic. Dominic's question is, how do you create and/or use the Create IND learning pass?
Can you repeat that again?
How do you create or use the learning pass is what
Right.
Dominic's question is.
So it goes back to the competencies. Once you understand the position that for that level, and so what we do is what we've done is we look at every level within the organization, and we look at the competencies for each level. Here we call them staff one, staff two. Um, we have coordinators, managers, supervisors, directors, and so for each level, we've understood what those competencies are, and then what we do is we create the learning, like a learning catalog of all the options for courses that will address that particular competency. And so we have a couple of learning plans for staff ones and staff twos and so on and so forth. But understanding the competencies and mapping that out is key.
Okay, perfect. We're going to move on to the next one from Monica. How do you map the competencies in an industry like legal where you can't move from assistant to lawyer internally?
Yeah, that's a very good question. What it comes down to there is how do you keep that person engaged? And so we go back to, because we have certain individuals or certain levels here that are in the same position. And so what we do is making sure that people are still growing, that we're making things available for them that will keep them engaged. And so those surveys are very important. Speaking to those managers is very important. Having those one-on-ones is very important. And then from there you can map out the particular learning plans that will address that individual or those individuals.
Okay, we got some questions rolling in here, so let me sort through them really quick. Okay, this one comes from Martha, Reggie, and Martha's question is, what is your best advice for keeping it simple in an online learning environment?
Yeah, and I mean, just like that, keep it simple. Not a lot of fancy transitions, not too many buttons for people to get lost in. Sometimes, less is more. And so that's where understanding good principles of instructional design are key. But you can't, if ever in doubt, make sure that you have less in there. So, something to go forward, one to go back, and one to exit out of the training. Um, and I think that will move. When I created my first online university, we were feeding all that learning through the POS system at the store level. So that meant we couldn't do a lot of video or audio. It was in basic HTML code, and so that meant that we couldn't do a lot of crazy stuff with our design, which is probably the best thing. Um, so that meant that we had to keep things very, very simple, very, very streamlined, um, for people to navigate.
Okay, great. We have another one here from John Reggie. John's question is, how do you go about building a good working relationship with a person that you are dealing with, or when the person you are dealing with seems to be so anti-training?
It takes time. The reality is that some people are never gonna buy it, and you have to be okay with that. I mean, sometimes you're not gonna convert everybody. Assuming, and I'm hoping that it's not your boss. Because if it's, I'm a firm believer that in order to create a culture of learning, it definitely has to be there has to be big buy-in from management. Even if the manager doesn't quite understand, that's where we can come in and probably educate a little bit and really earn their trust and respect with time. Now, if it's dealing with the average individual within an organization, give them time. Let them see the value of it. And what happens is, once people get excited about it, once you have enough people that have gone through, your training program or programs, they become your biggest evangelists. And I know that was the case when I moved from retail uh, to telecommunications. Uh, my that didn't have a culture of learning, and they weren't so inclined to online learning either. So a lot of the training was done in live classes, and people didn't want anything to do with it. But with time, people saw the value of it, and we had some very high marks at the end of my tenure there.
All right, thank you. We have one here from Lisa. Lisa's question is, do you believe there should be a balance of online learning face-to-face learning?
Yeah, and that's gonna depend on your particular setting. For when I was in retail, the bulk of the compliance and mandatory training was done online. Okay, so the product knowledge and how to work the POS, and the basics of customer service and store operations, all that was done online. And then what I focused on was training the trainer, and really working with seasoned and experienced managers in those levels. And then that's the way we balanced it. Like I said, in when I moved to my next company, a lot of the training was done um, face to face. And so what we used online training for was all the compliance, HR, IT security, anything that we wanted to push, to our 1,000 employees at one time. We also had some soft skills training available for people to take, and sometimes what we would do is they had to take some basic courses, and let's say in leadership or management, online before they actually got to sit in a classroom in level one, level two, level three. So it's really going to depend on your organization.
All right. We have another one here about keeping it simple again. How do you keep, and this comes from Kaylee, how do you keep online learning simple but not boring to keep their attention, especially from an aesthetic perspective?
Yeah, yeah, that's a very good question, and where Um, you know, if this person is an instructional designer, I would definitely trust that they would understand those principles. Um, if it's not an instructional designer, maybe sometimes I know that when I started working, I was creating all my own content, and I had to really learn the hard way. Because at the end of every training, we provided a survey. Um, it's a tough balance. I think that depending on the technology that you have, because sometimes you can put too much in a training module, and if you don't have the technology to really deliver it, it's going to backfire, right? You're going to have things drop and things buffer and audio that is not synced, and so I still subscribe to the fact that if you understand your learner, what their goals are, and you understand what you're trying to accomplish, then designing the course in the less is more philosophy. It cannot can it's probably the best option. I know that you want to make things interactive, and we've done that. We've included 5-minute videos and things for people to download, and we've included games and um, quiz questions along the way, and interactive activities along the way. It's really going to depend on your audience.
All right. This next one comes from Shauna, Reggie. Shauna's question is, how can we begin to overcome the challenge of employees' lack of time when they have to choose between their day-to-day work versus the development?
Yeah, that's and until your organization becomes a culture of learning, that's gonna be the biggest thing, right? I don't have enough time for this, right? Because they're looking at that as training for just for training's sake, right? It's not part of their DNA at that point. Again, it's going to take time. You have to be persistent. One of the things that I've learned is if you can engage management and upper management in training, uh, depending on their level of enthusiasm, and the value that they put on that training will tend to trickle down to the rest of the organization. And so my job really was to become a partner with management and upper management. Everybody's busy. I was trying to make them understand, look, I'm not trying to take people's times. I'm actually trying to help them become more efficient and effective. What are your needs? What are you lacking um, within your department? And I would go ahead and sometimes address those things. And once they see the value in that, then they'll help push that for you. They'll say you have to attend this training. This training is going to help you with XYZ. Whether it's leadership skills, management skills, communication skills, technical skills. You have to be involved in this, and so it takes time to get there, but it is definitely possible. I've seen it in retail, telecommunications, and now in the service industry.
All right. This next one, Reggie, is kind of a variation of a question we get a lot about getting buy-in and trust. This one comes from Robert. About what percentage of your time do you suppose you spend politicking with various
Yeah.
managers in order for them to earn your trust and respect?
Not enough. There's certainly not enough time, and that is especially true in the beginning, right? Because you're coming in new, and there's a lot of moving parts, and you don't know, and that's why I go back to learn the business, learn the structure, learn the people, who's who. I've spent I mean, most of my time actually is understanding those dynamics, because the last thing you want to do is launch something or propose something that it's gonna backfire, or you're gonna have resistance um, from most of management. And so I always make myself available. I schedule time with here where I am now, it's called service line leaders. And I say, look, I'm here to help. What are some of the gaps? What are some of the things that you're struggling with? Because I can guarantee you, every manager will have a laundry list of things that they're struggling with within their departments. And if you can align yourself and say, look, I wanna come alongside, you as the leader. It's always about them. It's always about the leader and the people that you're serving. As long as you come with that disposition, I think that you'll be successful, and people over time, people over time will buy. Now, is it going to be everybody? No. I mean, some people will never buy in, but if the majority do, then you're in good shape.
Okay, we got a little bit of time left. We got one here from Andrea. You mentioned surveys, and how do you use this information in the survey that you collect?
Yeah, and I think it is part of our design process, right? What we do is we break our surveys into three components. One is content. How's this content? Was the content relevant? Did it meet your needs? We definitely focus on content. Then is the delivery process, right? If it's an online course, was it easy to navigate? Was it appealing to the eye? Was it functional? Did it cause any problems? How were you using how did you download this? Was it a mobile device, a laptop, a tablet? Because I want to get down to did the technology work, and then I leave it up to I put some open-ended questions there as to what else we can offer. And I think that if you have those three components, it gives you a great roadmap as to how you're going to design your courses. Because if you find out through the survey that the content is not hitting the mark, then you know that you have to work on the content. If the content is fine, but the delivery method was not there, meaning people were frustrated with the way it was delivered, then you know that you have to work on that aspect of it. And if you completely miss the mark, and there's other things that you needed to focus on, they'll let you know. And I mean, that is very valuable. And what we do is, we compare that with one class after another, and making sure that those indicators are moving in the right direction. They're going up, and the level of satisfaction is moving in the right direction.
Great. We have a couple left, but they're around the same topic, and I think we can end on these two.
Okay.
From Janice and Cheryl. Janice's question is, what resources do you recommend for someone who is new to instructional design? And then Cheryl's question is, do you have any go-to research or resources that help you provide data for the business case of ROI of training in the culture of learning?
Yeah. So resources. Um, there's lots out there. I'm thinking right now, e-learning bros. YouTube is a great resource right now. I mean, you can learn a lot on instructional design. If people would research the ADDIE model, ADDIE model, um, definitely that'll help a great deal in how to design. The other thing is that the course authoring softwares that are out there today are pretty user friendly. I mean, they've come a long way. And so sign up. I mean, a lot of these course authoring softwares are free for 14 days or 21 days or 90 days or whatever they do. And if you call them back that was the case when I was learning. I would ask for more time, and they would most often than not they would give it to me. And that's how I learn. You have to have a good eye for design. You have to have a good eye colors and color schemes and font and that type of thing. And so some people are more artistic than others. But if you're not, I mean, you can still apply some of those principles. Again, if you less is more, you can never go wrong with that. And it's going to be a lot of trial and error. Now, on your second question, I mean, nothing at the top of my head right now. I know that I've done, for my doctorate, I did a lot of case studies from the Harvard Business School. ATD gives a great resources on ROI on training and development. I'm sure that webinars such as this, people who really focus on ROI of training and development, those resources are out there. So there's lots out there that people can tap into, and it's a matter of doing a Google search or YouTube search, and it'll be there.
All right, Reggie. Well, with that, that's all the questions we actually had in. I want to take the time to thank you for joining us today. We really appreciate you taking the time to be with us and present this topic. So thank you, Reggie. Thank you to today's sponsors of this Spotlight webinar at Cornerstone OnDemand, and I also want to thank everybody in attendance for their participation. We had quite a few questions rolling in, and we were able to get to them all. So thank you to those in attendance for your participation. If you enjoyed the presentation, please take the time to fill out our post-event survey, which will appear right as this webinar ends. Your feedback is obviously very important to us. So thanks again to Reggie, Cornerstone OnDemand, and everybody in the audience. We'll see everybody back here for our next Chief Learning Officer Magazine webinar, which will actually be tomorrow, Thursday, March 8th at 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Pacific, and that is titled Micro Learning, Are You Doing It Right? So thanks again, everybody, and have a great day.